There we go.
Yeah, just a full disclaimer. It's not July. It's now October. I put a timestamp on my PowerPoint presentations, and they change not quite every lesson, but pretty much every time I use a PowerPoint presentation, I'll make some tweak on it. So this is a slightly old version. So yeah, teaching philosophy. Your students will not follow your instructions. They will not understand them or not ignore them. So the most important thing we can do as teachers is provide some kind of role model for our students, because people copy what other people do. So if as teachers we are trying new things and making mistakes occasionally, that's probably the best thing we can do for our students, because if we want them to become better at English, they need to try new things and they need to make mistakes. So that's my excuse for every time I make a mess of things, and for the all the various mistakes there are in this PowerPoint presentation. So the last week then, I've been talking occasionally, every few weeks, I measure my students' reading speed. And with most things I realize, and I guess teachers are pretty boring people. And the reason they're boring is because they're always repeating themselves. And the reason they're repeating themselves is because the students don't listen most of the time, and they need to repeat themselves to get the important messages across. So I repeat my reading measurement, and I have various, it evolves over the course of a semester and over the course of a year. So right now we're in the second semester, and I get my students to do extensive reading. And I'm always aware that I don't tell them enough and often enough and in enough different ways why they should be doing this and how they should be doing this. So most of the things that I do in class relating to extensive reading, there's a strong element of reminding them why they're doing it, or for those of them who weren't listening the first time, telling them why they're doing it. So this is measuring reading speed is one way that we can do this, that we can show our students about extensive reading, about what we think they should be doing. And usually, so at the very beginning, when I start off introducing, when I start at the very beginning of their extensive reading, after I've given them out very easy books to read, a week or two later, I'll do a lesson about how fast. I just start off asking them how fast these various things, and I'll try and get them to use numbers when they talk about speed, and also teach a very important lesson about English, which is different to Japanese, and you may have spotted it already. And if you didn't spot it, then I think I can show them later. So speed is distance divided by time. So often, if you ask Japanese people who are speaking Japanese, how fast can you run? They'll say, 7 seconds. And 7 seconds is not, in fact, a speed. That's a time. And very fundamental, there are some fundamental differences between English and Japanese, which is important for our students to grasp, I think. And some of the students will get this very quickly. Some of the students will never get it. But this is Japanese, and this is English. Did you see the difference? Yeah, so I think I may use this again. Yeah, I've got this. I have this slide that repeats. That's Japanese. So sanbun no ni is Japanese, whereas English is 2/3. So and this is quite a fundamental difference between Japanese, is the order that information is given. That often in Japanese it starts with the whole and then tells you which part you are in the whole, whereas in English it's the other way around. In English it starts with where you are and then tells you what you are a part of. And so this is manifested in so when they're talking about how their speed, they need to tell us how many meters per second. So 50 meters in 30 seconds. And I often tell them, I digress quite a lot when I'm teaching. um, which and so last year when I was putting all my slides into recorded PowerPoint presentations, I realized that about 50% of my lessons are digressions, that I go off on tangents during my slides, and those actually are probably the most important part. So I tell them a story of when I first came to Japan, and I got we used to write letters. This was before the internet was invented, and when you had to take out a mortgage every time you wanted to make a phone call. So I'd write letters, and I think I had 10 letters, and it was about 280 yen for a stamp to send these letters back to my friends and family in England. So I went to the post office, and in my best Japanese, I tried to get 10 290 yen stamps, but I ended up coming out with 290 10 yen stamps. So by the end, my tongue was never recovered really from that. Anyway, I digress, as I say. So we can do numbers, and we can look at reading. We can look at speed and what speed is distance over time. So, for example, it's 50 meters in however many seconds, or whatever. So this is what speed is. Speed is distance over time. So reading speed is reading speed. We can measure. How do we measure reading speed? Well, we could say very fast, fast, slow, very slow, but that's not actually a measurement. What we need is words per minute, and otherwise known as WPM. And yeah, number of words in time. So what I do is I have my students read every lesson. So every lesson they have a book in class, and if they don't, I send them to the library to get a book, and I measure their reading speed with the book that they are reading, which is probably the best. It's probably the most important reading speed, is the speed in the book that they're actually reading, because that will tell them a lot about the book. So in order to measure reading speed, they need to basically find a book. They need to find a starting point. They need to read for a couple of minutes, then mark the end point, then count the number of lines, and then we can calculate words per minute. And in order to measure, comics are not ideal for measuring reading speed. I usually, in the class, I usually have a few quite low-level readers that are not comics. Some of the Choose Your Own Adventures. These are great books for the students to read, but again, not ideal for measuring reading speed. So they find a starting point. I give them 2 minutes. I time them as they're reading. After the 2 minutes, they can do that if they're at home. After the 2 minutes, I tell them to stop. And then I get them to just count how many lines they have read. I encourage them to count in English because of numbers being very important, and to write how many lines in their notebooks. And then I give them the this way of working out. So the reading speed is the number of lines they read times the average words per line divided by the number of minutes. For the average words per line, I get them to choose a quite accurate way to do this is to choose a 10-line block and count how many words there are in 10 lines, and then divide by 10. And I need a bit of help, actually. So when I give this instruction, there's always a few students who will just write down the number of lines in the number of words in each one of 10 lines. So they write like 9, 11. And I don't want them to do that. I want them to count just there's 10 lines. And I don't know how to change these instructions so to make them count the whole 10-line block. But anyway, that's an aside. If you have any ideas, please let me know. Because what happens is because it's quite. I mean, they should be able to. They should be able to count. It's something like 100. It's something like 10. It's around 10 line. The average line has about 10 words on. So this number is something like 10. and they should be able to just count up to something like 100. But they end up like writing it. Then they start adding up all the numbers, which of course they're doing in Japanese, so it ceases to be practice for using. Anyway, that's dividing by 10 is very easy. These kind of calculations are very difficult. I encourage my students to use calculators, which you'd think teaching first year engineering students, that you'd think they would automatically use a calculator. But Miguel's teaching second year engineering students. They probably don't even use calculators. So so this is something I remember when I was at school. When I was at school, calculators started to be used in education, and this must have been kind of maybe the end of the 70s, the early 80s. And I think it was this must be the 1970s, which I'm sure most of you, Mary and Fred and I, are far too young to remember the 1970s. But so they would bring these. And there was some pushback against this. Oh no, if the kids use calculators, they won't be able to. They would never be able to do any arithmetic. And I remember one maths teacher guy could say, "Look, one calculator plus one calculator equals two calculators." So the point is, they need to use calculators because it's the 21st century. And if they go into a meeting with someone and start getting out their paper and starting to do hikizan to work out what the sales projection is, surely that's not going to work. Anyway, so they can work out. So back to reading speed, back to calculations and the lesson. They can work out their reading speed, and that's basically that's the core of students measuring their reading speed. There are many things that you can expand on this. One thing that I often do is get them to repeat their reading speed. So go back to the same book, same starting point, same 2 minutes, and read their reading speed again. And usually again, I'll usually get them so that I find mysteriously that the second time was not the same as the first time. And as we know from science, if we measure something and get a different measurement, we should take a third measurement in order to see which one was correct. So I then get them to read usually a third time, and then we can then look at their 3 reading speeds. And very often, so I ask which is the real reading speed, and very often they'll tell us that their real reading speed was their first reading speed, which is usually the slowest one. Which is interesting because I often start off asking them how fast they can run and how fast they can swim. So I then go back and say, well, when you said you can run 50 meters in 4 seconds, was that the first time you ran that? And of course it's not, it's the fastest. So when we're talking about how fast they can run or how fast they can swim, they'll tell us their fastest speed. And now all of a sudden I'm asking them how fast they can read, and they'll tell me their slowest time, which is interesting. And I usually leave it there as being interesting. But of course, there's the reading. And if I measure my reading speed goes up if I read the same passage a second time. And the reason it does is because you're becoming more familiar with the words. So there's an important lesson in here. And there are many more ways of expanding on what the reading speed means. And for a native speaker, 500 words per minute is very fast, 400 is fast, 200 is slow, 100 is very slow. Now, my students are not native speakers, of course. So these are the speeds for a non-native speaker. 500 is still very fast. 400 is still fast. 200 is still slow. 100, it's still very slow, whether they're a native speaker or not a native speaker. 100 words per minute is slow. And I can, of course, native speakers are usually faster at reading because they read more and have read more. Of course, some native speakers are not fast readers. Some native speakers do not read. Some native speakers cannot read. So if they're a slow non-native speaker, they're already faster than many native speakers. So this whole, I mean, the whole idea of native, non-native speaker is not really very helpful. What is helpful is thinking about the, as a learner, often 180 words per minute is seen as like a threshold for reading speed. Oh, hang on, slow down. I'll just stop before I get to these. Back. For something like the TOEIC test, to get a good score in the TOEIC test, reading through all the questions, you need about 180 words per minute. If they're reading low-level books, 150 words per minute is quite a good speed that they shouldn't worry about. And I have a demonstration of what 60 words per minute is like, which I will just show you. And then this is 60 words per minute. If they're reading at that speed and they don't like English and find English boring, it's not surprising. What they need to do is, what's very, very important is there's a Nuttall has a this is based on Nuttall, which is this is the vicious cycle of poor readers. And basically, if you don't understand what you're reading, you can't read quickly. If you can't read quickly, you won't enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, if you're not reading quickly, you won't read very much. And if you don't read very much, you won't get better. And so you won't understand. And this is the vicious cycle of reading that leads nowhere, basically. What we need to turn this around, so they can understand easily. If they can understand easily, then they will read more quickly. If they're reading more quickly, then they will enjoy. Actually, there's a few reasons why reading more quickly, the story's moving more quickly. So it's more enjoyable as a story. The other thing, counterintuitively, is that when you read more quickly, it's easier and less work for your brain. When you read slowly, it's because often you're thinking about the words and translating words and thinking about the grammar. And this is all very difficult for your brain. If you're reading more quickly, you're not thinking about the words and not thinking about the grammar. It's therefore easier for your brain. So that's another reason why reading more quickly is more enjoyable. So it's more enjoyable because the story's moving faster. It's also more enjoyable because it's less work. And as a result of reading being enjoyable, we're likely to read more. Reading more, we can read better, and reading better, we can understand more easily. And I think I will leave you at that point. I could quite easily talk for the rest of the day on this topic. But that's all. Please get in touch if you have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, can we have a round of applause for Mark, please? Thank you. Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Excuse me. I'm a little bit nervous for attending our presentation.
This is you.
This is a collaborative approach to taking elementary English by Shiho Kuramitsu
and Trent Abbott. Our presentation title was recently changed from The Benefits of a Dedicated Japanese English Teacher at Elementary Schools.
So I have kindergarten, elementary school, and junior high school licenses. And I also have my J-Shine elementary school English teaching license. I studied in 3 different universities, and I have 4-year experience as an English teacher in elementary school.
And I studied Global Studies East Asia at Ohio University. I received my TEFL in 2011 and started as an ALT in 2013. I have been working 8 years as an ALT in Nagano, and I am currently the Japanese Language Coordinator Officer for the Nagano chapter of JALT. So what are we discussing about today? First, we would like to discuss the problems with English education at the elementary level. Second, we would like to discuss the difficulties that ALTs face in their work situations. Third, about the lesson plans that we developed together, and how our relationship has a positive impact on English learning. Shiho, can you tell us what's going on with elementary English?
Okay, yes. Starting in 2020, English has made into an official subject in elementary school. And all over Japan, many ALTs have been assigned to those schools all over the country. This is a part of next plans to provide a source of living English. Excuse me. However, there are many problems and obstacles present in elementary schools. Sorry, ちょっと待ってね。Sorry, excuse me. どこだっけ
Obstacles?
Yeah, obstacles present in elementary schools that making it difficult for HLTs and ALTs to work together to teach English. So some examples include HLTs being too busy and difficulty understanding the content of new textbook and then teaching said content to the students. And difficulty coming to a mutual understanding through either English or Japanese. In the middle of this, we find ourselves in a unique position. As a JTE and ALT, we work together at the same school at the same time every day in our elementary school. We think that when compared with other schools' circumstances, we are in a very fortunate situation. In our presentation, we would like to talk about the positive impact that a strong collaboration between ALTs and JTEs can have on the students and the HLTs and the lesson plans themselves. First, my co-presenter Trent Abbott will share a personal account of what it was like to work with a JTE. Could you share with us your experience, Trent?
I sure will. Thank you, Shiho. In 2013 and 2016, I worked in different cities before coming to my current elementary school in 2018. In each city, I had to work at more than 3 different elementary schools. When I first came to Japan and started working as an ALT, English education in elementary schools was still relatively new, so no one knew how to approach teaching it. From the very first day, I was required to lead the class as the main teacher despite my assistant status because so few HRTs had English teaching ability. It was very challenging at first, but I gradually got used to the situation and wanted to communicate more with the students and HRTs. However, as I was working at 3 different schools, it was not easy for me to remember everyone's names, which was a major communication obstacle for me. Also, it was very difficult for me at first to conduct meetings about lesson plans in Japanese. When I moved to the next city, it became even more difficult to remember names and to communicate with the teachers and students because I worked at 4 different schools. Moreover, since I was treated as the main teacher and given full responsibility of all facets of English classes, meetings with HRTs were regarded as unnecessary. Next, Shiho will tell us about another ALT situation.
Okay, here we have an account to share from another HLT working in different locations. He currently works at 3 different schools and works with 2 different JTEs. Unfortunately, because they work at so many different locations, they are unable to work together on every lesson. Because of this, he can only teach half of lessons for each grade in a standard school year. Working at different schools bring with it similar difficulties with communication, such as remembering the names of the students in each school and having time to hold meetings with JTEs and HLTs. As far as lesson planning is concerned, the ALT and JTEs try to plan lessons the same way for each school, but each school's circumstances are different, so lessons end up changing to match each context. In addition, he also stated that it is confusing who he is working with from lesson to lesson. One lesson he could be team teaching with an HLT, and the next class he could be working with JTE. Given these circumstances, we can see how it would be difficult for them to collaborate with one another and consistently achieve the goal of their lessons. Ideally, they should be able to work daily with each other. Don't you agree, Trent?
Definitely, just like we do. Now it's time we compare our situation. As we mentioned earlier, we are very fortunate to be able to work in this environment. Normally, elementary schools follow the textbooks decided by Mixed and just use Mixed's lesson plans. According to Krashen, we acquire language when we understand what we hear or read. Comprehension leads to acquired competence or implicit knowledge of language, a feel for correctness. In order to achieve acquired competence, we need to supply our students with comprehensible input. When we analyzed the textbook's lesson plans, we determined that the amount of input was insufficient or the input was poorly timed. We knew we needed to provide input that was more relatable to our students' context so that they could more easily acquire the form of that lesson. But we also believe that students have a higher probability of acquiring the language if they do so while enjoying themselves. We decided to look at elementary English language learning as a whole. Starting from first grade on to sixth grade, we are implementing the spiral method, using fun and engaging activities supplemented by comprehensible input along the way. In order to accomplish this, we must clarify the goals for the grade, the units, and the lessons, and determine how all of these are interconnected with other grades, units, and lessons. How do we make our lesson plans, Shiho?
Okay, let me show you. First, we identify the sentences and the goal that the unit wants to teach the students as determined by Mixed. Then we check the number of lessons. Next, we talk about the final activities. Depending on the number of lessons, we discuss the timing of the word introduction, the timing of the first sentence, the second sentence, the appropriate games, and if it's the students find the activity interesting. These are just some of the things that we discuss about and work on together. We have a clear goal for each lesson, and sometimes we choose to avoid materials in the textbook if we believe it doesn't accomplish that goal. Instead, we think it would be more beneficial to have the students practice with games and the other activities that are more delicious to them. For example, if you want to input a word, you can play a card game that combines the target words along with a picture of the word. And if you want to do a lot of sentence output, you can play a game where the students have to ask their classmates using the target phrase repeatedly.
One of the approaches we use to clarify lesson goals and plans for both ourselves and the students is through the use of our today's menu. By looking at today's menu, they are able to get an overview of what they will learn for the day. Nowadays, our students have grown so accustomed to this that they naturally react by saying,
yeah, what's today's game, or what the print out for?
As we mentioned before, we want to make our lesson plans fun, but we also want to make them more entertaining and more acceptable. In order to accomplish this, sometimes we have to change the final activities that are provided in the textbooks. Shiho, would you like to show us some examples?
Sure. One such example in Here We Go 6, Unit 6, This Is My Town. The goal was to have the students research and present about their own town, which is a small village. But when we wanted them to use the target language, we thought that a village just doesn't have enough to present about. So we decided to set a goal for of buying the facilities you want to with a budget of 100 million yen and create your own town. And then had each group design their own map. Afterwards, they had to present the interesting point and recommendation of their original town. During this presentation, they were able to present their own ideas by naturally using sentences like,
We have a stadium. You can see baseball games.
and here is another example.
Yes, for the My Summer Vacation unit, since students were not able to enjoy their summer vacation due to COVID-19, they were asked to share about their journeys overseas or to space using their imagination. The students were able to soothe their frustration of not being able to go anywhere during the summer vacation through this activity. And the tablets that were introduced into the schools played a very large role in this. The students had to use the phrases, I went to, I saw, I ate, I enjoyed, to express where they went and what they did there. Lastly, they had to use it was plus an adjective to describe their experience, such as it was great or it was fantastic. This student decided to create a title slide, an idea that the student came up with by themselves. They decided to go to the UK, which of course is something that they could not have accomplished easily during the pandemic. Next, they mentioned King's Cross Station, a name of a famous location from the Harry Potter novel series. Then they decided to eat a popular dish from that country. Even though we gave students the creative freedom to go anywhere, this student deliberately chose real locations, while some of their classmates chose fictitious ones. Wow, it seems like we're making a number of changes, Shiho.
Yeah, but even though we are making these changes to the content, the goals that the students are achieving are the same. The level of the goal may be harder to reach, but like we said before, we believe that learning is more effective when the students are enjoying themselves. So we should investigate whether or not the students are enjoying themselves. So get an idea of how the students feel about the classes they are taking. We use reflection cards, 振り返りカード, each class to collect feedback from the students and see their progress. Here are some examples of what the students have to say about our lesson. Here are some comments for Here We Go 5, Unit 2. When is your birthday? From the first lesson, they already understood how to say months in English, and also that their birthday is on December. By the second lesson, they understand their birthday's date too. And finally, they felt they could do many things using English and have fun in our English classes. Here are some comments for Here We Go 6, Unit 3, What do you want to watch? By the third lesson, they could use do you want to watch many times. By the fourth lesson, they could use what do you want to watch during the game time. Finally, they felt they could use these sentences to communicate, and they had the chance to learn about the Olympics too. We put the data from the feedback cards into a graph. On the left side, we can see the number of students. On the bottom, we can see the Likert scale. Students used to grade themselves with 4 being the lowest score and awesome being the highest. From this, we can observe that students feel more capable as the unit continues. They often feel like they can say what they couldn't say before and hear what they couldn't hear before. This results in the students feeling more motivated as they begin to feel like they own the words and patterns of the unit.
We are not saying that all of our methods are perfect. However, we can say that our daily talks, close communication, and understanding of the names and personalities of all the students in our classes has impacted not only us, but also the students and the teachers who work at the school. This is because when all of us, including the HRTs, teach English as a team, it is easier for us to work together and aim for the same goal. Also, because we, the HRTs and the English team, are always working towards the same goal, we can create lesson plans designed around spiral learning. As we mentioned earlier, this spiral is part of our curriculum that starts from the first grade through to the sixth grade, and even on through junior high school. The close relationship we have with our HRTs helps us to improve upon this curriculum. Their input helps by adding more structure to our lessons, creating materials to prepare students for junior high school, and sharing game ideas with each other. At the end of the day, our situation is nothing more than the benefits that we have reaped from our fortunate environment.
But we will continue to work hard to make the most of the lucky situation and provide more original and wonderful lessons in the future. Thank you.
Recently, university classes have gone online. Some people prefer learning online on a computer through the internet. Other people prefer learning in person in a classroom. And some people think a blended system is best. All right, when you have some classes online and some in person, which method do you think is best? Give reasons and specific examples to support your answer. Now, seeing my students every day, seeing their very tired and unexcited looks on some of them, by this phase of online learning, I was convinced that most of them were ready to go back in the classroom, and most of them were just sick of Zoom. But reading their answers, it was the exact opposite. It was a three-way split. All right, 33% wanted face-to-face classes, 33% said online, 33% said blended. And I was really shocked at these answers. I said, what's going on here? Don't you guys hate this? And then I realized, oh, they're just second-year students. The honeymoon phase of being in university is over. And they're just going through the motions to get through this. But this did spur me to do this research in 2020. Okay, so here are the three research questions that I sought for my paper. What were the impressions of learning online? And gathering their answers, what parts of online learning could be improved to be more effective? And should remote learning continue? What should we change? Okay, now I know with vaccine rates, I think Japan's now at almost 70%. Most people are looking to go back to face-to-face, but after doing this research, I strongly feel that there is still potential for online learning. Okay, so this is what my research was. Basically, I asked the second-year students at my university a 13-question questionnaire. We used a Likert scale style. Everything was done in Japanese. And every question had a little part where students can write additional comments about their answers. The final question was a question for all the students. If you are interested, please, I'd be very happy to talk to you about it in an interview. Okay. Now the second year student part is very important because the second year students had experience in face-to-face classes and in online classes. All of these students were from global management majors. So generally they all had the same, pretty much the same experiences in their first and second year. Okay, so we had 44 students reply to the questionnaire. The questionnaire was done in the spring semester, in the spring holiday. So unfortunately, if it was during the semester, I think more students would have replied. No one checks their emails in spring vacation, right? And I was very fortunate. 6 students agreed to an interview. The average interview time was 25 minutes. Okay, so on to the results. You can see here, these were the first 2 questions. What did you think about online learning at the start of the year? What did you think after? Okay, now they weren't very promising. It wasn't very slanted towards bad, but there was more bad than good. And after 1 year, nothing really changed. So after learning for 1 year, not many people changed their impression of online learning. Some of the comments were like this. Let's just look at the highlighted ones here. I feel more relaxed and less tense in a remote class than in a face-to-face class. Now, if you think about your introverted students or your students who, feel a lot of social pressure, they're not in a clique, online classes are better for them, right? Communication was a big issue. I'll talk about this next, but this person said you can't hear the other person's voice. Discussions would, they wouldn't get heated. They wouldn't get very energetic. All right, so this segues, hold on. Yeah, another student here liked group work in Zoom because it was easier. You wouldn't have to choose your partner. You can just hit the breakout room and you'll always have new partners to talk to. Now, this one was very troubling, especially when you were teaching English. Most people thought that the communication on an online lesson was bad. However, look at the comments here, okay? People weren't using their cameras. Now, this is a very debated topic. Some people say on, some people say off. To me, it's very clear that the students wanted cameras on when they were communicating. Okay, now, personally in my classes, I've made it a rule, cameras on in breakout rooms, and most people were very happy with that. Another thing was connection problems. And again, this goes back to sort of preparing for an online class. A lot of students were thrown into this, and things like, how do I reset my router? How do I use a direct LAN connection to my router instead of using Wi-Fi? A lot of these things they learned as they went. And what many students told me in their interviews and the comments was they found the problems with connections and things became easier later in the year. How do you feel about asking a teacher for help or advice? Now, this one is interesting because it was very split halfway. It was very much a 50-50 split. However, when you read the comments, they're either very positive or very negative, okay? Some students liked using the chat function on Zoom. It's much better than raising your hand and asking a question. Some teachers, the students said, "Kuki yomenai, zuto katani suzuita." So they couldn't read the room. They couldn't understand that students didn't understand what they were teaching, and the teacher would just continue nonstop. And I think this speaks to a sort of pedagogy with online learning, where you have to really change your perspective when you are teaching. You can't just teach something and say, okay, does everybody understand? Do you have any questions? Okay, let's move on. You really need to give more time. If students are trying to type something and type a question, they're not very fast typers. You need to give them more time. Another thing as well that I have done in my classes is I've just finished them 20 minutes, 30 minutes early, and I've dedicated that time to getting students to do their homework or asking the teacher for questions about the class. That has actually been the most effective. I've never gotten so many questions, even compared to a face-to-face class, as I have having that last 20 minutes of Zoom for just question time. How did you physically feel about a class? Most people said not great, okay, compared to a face-to-face class. Now, again, similar to communication, a lot of students wrote problems about having sore eyes, back pain from sitting down for so long. And to me, this speaks that students weren't taught about ergonomics at the start of the year. People really didn't turn, oh, this is how you should think about your posture, the lighting in your room, your eye level for your monitor, things like this. So I'm very confident that should things be online again, explanations about ergonomics, simple things like that, could go a very long way to make things better for students. Stress. The other question here was about stress, and most students felt more stressed about online lessons compared to face-to-face. Something worth noting though is the comments were very interesting. These were just a few. They both have good and bad points. Okay. And if you add them up, well, they're about the same. And again, here, another student said that they could get more sleep and had more free time, but they miss seeing their friends. So again, it was kind of a zero sum where it balanced itself out. Now, this one again is really the crux question of my research, where it was a pretty much three-way split. Now, this surprises me because if you think about the answers that we had up till now, most students would say online learning was worse, but yet they'd still prefer online learning or even blended learning. Okay. And it was only until I did the interviews that I really started to see the full picture of what students felt about this. One student here wrote, I felt I could concentrate more in an online class because I had more freedom during the class. The student said they could stand up, stretch their legs, eat a snack. Another student said they would listen to a lecture while they were doing house chores. I like this comment here as well. The student said they felt more like an adult because they had more responsibility over their schedules, over their time. Everything wasn't decided by the teacher. For their on-demand classes, they could say, okay, I'm going to go to work in the morning, do this in the afternoon. I can do my classes at night. They had that freedom and they enjoyed that. Oh, thanks, Mark. That's okay. This, I think, was a very big part of the research that really opened my eyes, where something I didn't really take into account. Students in the later parts of their courses have less class time. They have less classes. They have more. So the online classes give them more flexibility in their course. Okay. Some of them are doing work experience or internships, or they're doing their research. So it makes sense to have the flexibility of an online class where they don't need to come to university. All right. Another student here, he said before this, he said that I want fun classes to be face-to-face and everything else online. And I asked him, what is a fun class? He said the English classes. Okay, and I can see why. Okay, communicating face-to-face, there's no substitute for that compared to going online. Okay, now there are a lot of comments here, but I can just skip through this. We don't have much time. Let's just jump to the conclusions. Now, the conclusions really are a lot of anecdotal things that I have seen through teaching and talking to other students. I don't claim to be an expert on online teaching, but I just want to share this one comment that I got from a student, that it says in English that the way Miguel handles Zoom was very nice, and other teachers, well, the student hoped that other teachers had the same approach that I did. So I guess it's a bit of a flex. So what did I learn from this research? Number one, students weren't prepared for 2020. Online learning was just thrown on them. Here's a computer, you can use the internet. Okay, come to my class. They need more preparation. They need education on how to do things properly online. Teachers as well, okay, should be open to shifting to on-demand content. World language here, I'm sure you're aware of flipped learning. If you are going to be lecturing or talking to your students for a long time, record a video, give them the video on their LMS, and they can watch it in their own time. Okay, if it's just one-way learning, students would prefer a video. They can pause it, they can watch it in their own time, they could watch it again. There's no reason that they should be sitting down for 20, 30 minutes listening to you talk in Zoom. Zoom lessons need to be more open for students to interact. Okay. The raise hand functions, the Zoom chat, using your LMS, personalizing your LMS. Okay. This is a really big one. Giving students more freedom to put what they want on an LMS, changing the themes, having questions that they want to ask each other there is a really good way to get them enjoying interacting online. This is a really big conclusion point here that I really feel strongly about. A lot of teachers would say, okay, here are your discussion questions, open the breakout rooms, you have 10 minutes, go. And we've talked about the problems with communication, the time delay. Okay, you don't know when to speak because by the time you start speaking, another student is speaking. Problems with connectivity, problems with hearing people properly. Online discussions are different to face-to-face discussions. And one of the ways you can tackle this is by giving students roles. Okay, you are the discussion leader. You will ask the questions. You will ask people to talk. You will be the scribe. You will take minutes. You will record what you talked about and upload it to the LMS. Okay. Once students have more specific roles, they don't need to, they know what they're doing. They don't have this awkward, do you do this or do I do this? Because that time lag really creates these situations. And finally, this is my last message from the research on remote learning should be an option for students. If you're thinking about students with neurodiversity, okay, social issues, the reclusive students, your futoko, the students who refuse to come to school. Think about the students as well with financial difficulties. I teach many students who are working to be in university, okay? They pay everything themselves. Imagine if they could stay at home, okay, with their parents. They don't have to worry about paying rent for every month. How much less stress that is for them, how much more they can focus on their studies. I also have students who need to go back to their hometowns to look after their families. Okay, imagine if online learning was still an option for them. It would really make things easier for them. Okay, and that is the.
So this is my corny working title, Singlish, yay. And it's the applications of music pedagogy in the ESL classroom or second language classroom. I think it's applicable to all languages. So my name is Kirk. I am a researcher from the University of British Columbia, where I'm doing a doctoral degree in musicology, ethnomusicology, specifically on the music of Okinawa, folk music. And I'm also a research associate with the Okinawa University of Arts. And for money, I teach as an English teacher in the public school system, and I'm also a part-time lecturer at Shinshu University. And having kind of making a shift from music to ESL and second language research, I'm looking at ways of bringing my music background into this new area of study. Okay, let's see if I can just, okay, so I'm gonna start with this. A little quiz for everybody. Which do you think came first for early hominids, singing or speaking? If you think it's singing, give me a little thumbs up or something. Okay, if you think it's speaking, give me a thumbs up. Okay, well, boy, it's singing. And let me just talk about this a little bit. This is an area of research that we looked at the University of British Columbia in a course entitled Music Evolution. And Steve Mythen published a book in 2007 called The Singing Neanderthals, Origins of Music, Language, Mind, and Body. And his conclusion is that language evolved from singing. And this, I'm not going to go too deep into this. You should check out the book if you're interested. But this was a challenge on Steven Pinker's assertion that music is a byproduct of some other evolutionary adaptation, what he called auditory cheesecake, which caused a lot of people to get up in arms. I'm just going to see if I can switch to my notes version here. Oh, that's not working. All right, whatever, I'll just wing it here. So why is this important? It's important because speech and language are based on singing. So this, because of the fact that it's based on singing, it has large implications, I believe, for ESL and second language learning. I'm just going to get into a few examples now of, if anyone wants to ask me questions about the background of this theory or discuss it, I can do that after, but I'm just going to skip this and get right into some applications of music pedagogy that I find useful in the English classroom. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about the element of rhythm. There's a saying, I'm a musician, and there's a saying amongst musicians that if you can say it, you can play it. Jazz players say if you can sing it, you can swing it. There's another little variation on that. So what I like to do sometimes with difficult pronunciation is to look at the rhythmic profile of a phrase. So here I'm just going to give you an example. This is a audio recording from second-year university students in general education with this tricky phrase, the crystals are visually stunning. So have a listen here. When diamonds are cut and polished for jewelry, the crystals are visually stunning. When diamonds are cut and polished for jewelry, good. Is that audible to everybody? Okay, I'll
Yes.
continue. Okay. The crystals are visually stunning. Good. So when we're practicing reading, like we said before, remember, think of English like a musical phrase. It has a melody, it has a rhythm. So the crystals are visually stunning. Da 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 da. Say it. Da 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 da. Maybe it's funny, but try anyway. The crystals are visually stunning. Da 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 da. Hey. The crystals are visually stunning. The crystals are visually stunning. Okay, that sounds way better already. Your pronunciation has gone up. So when we're listening to English and practicing, try to think about the rhythm in your mind, okay? And the melody. Okay, so this is one way. Diamonds are cut and polished. This is one way of visualizing sound. By listening to the rhythm of it and imitating the rhythm. Okay, so iterating the rhythm and then adding the speech on top of it. Did the same experiment with a couple of Kaiwa students. I do this at junior high school, any level really. These are elementary school students. I'll just give you a quick, this is from the book Speed Phonics. Now the bug is on the land. It's long, yeah? It's a long phrase. Just listen to the rhythm. Now the bug is on the land. Da 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 da. Big voice. Da 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 da. Now the bug is on the land.
Now the bug is on the land.
Great. Okay. So it works for all ages. Now the bug. A second example I'm going to look at is what we call in music practicing backward. And this is when we learn a musical piece in small sections from back to front. Rather than working from the beginning and working through a piece of music, it doesn't have to be written music, of course, but I'm just giving you a visual example. Working from the beginning toward a goal, we work backward from the goal, okay, rather than toward it. And I'll discuss the benefits of this in just a minute, but let's look at an example. Oh, so here's what we would do. So this is the ending of, this is the little section here on the bottom, and this is what it looks like. So first we're going to start with this small phrase, the final phrase. Once we've mastered this phrase, we're going to play from this phrase to the end. And once we've done that, we're going to go from this phrase, and we're going to keep going back in whatever sections you're comfortable with, whatever sections you can play with full concentration and playing relaxed as well. Now, how does this apply to learning English? Well, it was a fellow teacher, Mark Spring, who tipped me off on the fact that there's a term for this in English language education. This is all very new to me, by the way, so this isn't cutting edge research just yet anyway, but it's kind of new to me when I'm presenting to you. So anyway, a concept called back chaining, which some of you might be familiar with. And here's an example using the same two students of how I can apply this in a class. Let's look at this one here. The chick sings a song.
The chick sings a song.
Ah, it's tricky, yeah? Okay, sings a song.
Sings a song.
Okay, let's try this. A song.
A song.
A song.
A song.
Sings a song.
Sings a song.
Da da da.
Sing.
Da da da.
Da da da.
Sings a song.
Sings a song.
Can you say sing, not sing, sings,
Sing.
sings,
Sing.
sings a song,
Sing a song.
sings a song.
Sing a song.
Try this. You can see where they're tripping up between the word sings and song, sings a song. So I break it down a little further for them here. The song,
The song.
the song,
The song.
sings a song.
Sings a song.
And they got it. Chick sings a song.
Chick sings a song.
Chick sings a song.
Chick sings a song.
The chick sings a song.
The chick sings a song.
The chick sings a song. Slow it down a little
The
bit.
chick sings a song.
Good. Now listen. Da 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 da. Hey. Da 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 da. Big voice. Da 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 da. Hey.
Da 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 da.
Da 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 da.
Da 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 da.
The chick sings a song.
The chick sings a song.
They got it. The chick sings a song.
The chick sings
Then we have some
a
fun
song.
with it. The chick sings a song.
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 Great. Good job. Okay, so you can see it didn't take much time working in that method for them to get that little part that was tripping them up. Now, the benefits of this back chaining approach, or practicing from the back, in music and in language learning, is it helps improve the phrasing or the flow of a phrase. It also helps with pronunciation, as you've seen in the examples. It helps with memorization. This is particularly useful in music when you're trying to memorize a piece of music. If you learn from the back, then you're working toward that goal, and you're able to do it relaxed, because what happens is when we mess up in the middle of a piece of music, or in the middle of a speech that students have to memorize and give, we're thinking about what's coming next, and we're apprehensive about what's coming next because we've memorized it from the beginning. We're most confident at the beginning of the piece or speech. But as we move through it, we're getting to the parts that we haven't practiced as much. So we get nervous and we trip up. So learning from the back, we know where we're going. We have a clear idea. Where we're going is a comfortable zone. So it enables us to relax and get through the piece or the speech successfully. So this is just a few examples. I have many things I could discuss in this area, and it's, like I say, it's still a new area of research for me, but I would say that in conclusion, exploring the applications of music pedagogy in ESL and L2 learning can make for effective and very enjoyable language study. And that's all. Thank you very much.
I don't have really any really deep ideas to impart to you guys, but I have what I think is a practical resource to use that I really like. So what I recommend is, what I usually do with my students is, a lot of my students either have a tablet that's been assigned to them, or we have tablets that we can use in the school for the class. So Socrative is kind of a similar to like a poll anywhere, or it's a way to send questions to students and to, I call it kind of digital classroom in a way. So first, what I'll say is, if you have a phone or a tablet or something, I recommend using that for this, and I will direct you to the website where we'll be using this. So I'm going to share my screen. My internet's kind of waxing and waning here. I've got to back up in case it falls out, but it may happen. So like I said, you can use the same computer you're using the Zoom on, but I recommend if you have a separate device to use that for this part. And if you can use this online or in person, if you were going to use this in person, just imagine that my screen would be, I would have that projected behind me on the class. So let's see, I'm going to share. Okay, can you see, I've got Google here, that coming up? Okay, so I always tell students to just go Google Socrative. I always tell them to just Google Socrative, and we're going to go to this link here, student login. When you've got a tab or for separate device to go to the student login. Socrative, go to student login.
Sorry, Chris. Henry, can I just stop you real quickly? Everybody, could you turn off your video? This might help Henry's bandwidth. Just bump it up a little bit more.
Oh, am I?
Yeah, so video's off. Yeah, you're just lagging a bit. Let's see if this will help. Okay. Sorry, please continue.
Sure. How? So, but you can hear me, right? Or should I repeat?
No, we can hear you so far. It just cuts in and out here and there.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so we'll go to Socrative, and we want to go to student login. And when you go to the student login page, the name of my room is Ego Love. So when you get to the student login, you'll have the choice. You'll have to please type in Ego Love is the name of my Socrative classroom. Are we okay so far? Do I need to repeat anything?
No, I can see it.
Then I'll go to, I'm logged in under a teacher account. And I have sent, this is kind of the main screen options here. It's pretty simple. This is the free version. Everything I'm doing today is on the free version of Socrative. The paid version has some more bells and whistles. I've never used that version. The free version I've used for years, and I find it quite sufficient for what I want to do. But I have one room. One room on here. So I signed in with Google. What I recommend is if you make an account with them, just use sign in with Google. It's much easier to make a Socrative account. Sometimes you get kicked out, but once you log back in, it's pretty straightforward. So I have some quizzes that I've built up, and just let's jump into it. I actually, once you log in, you should immediately see it should immediately give you a question. And this is an example. If you want, and you can see this, again, this is the teacher side of things, but I can see that there are 3 people logged in to this classroom, and I can see one person is already answering some questions here. So I'm gonna hide the responses. And if you want to just go ahead and start answering the questions, and you can get an idea of some of the questions that are there. So, this is just, I call this the fun quiz. This is one of the ones that I use to either introduce Socrative to the students or introduce to other people. Right? So I'll go ahead, I'll give you a little bit of time. Please answer the questions that as you log in, and then we can go through and we'll see how everyone did. And I've set up this quiz to be anonymous. So I did, but what I could have done was require that students put a name in when they log in. And if I wanted to, for example, take a grade or give I've given an exam through this before that I wanted to take a grade for. So I required the students put their real name in. You could also require names and have students put a nickname, or it could have really put anything. But one of the benefits of this is that we have anonymous names. And so students don't have to feel like they're going to really be put on the spot or anything. So I tried to make some fun questions. Some of them are really silly, I think, but I often use Socrative in maybe if I have a new class of students. It might be one of the first things I do. I have another quiz that I call the Henry quiz that I use as kind of self-introduction. So feel free to make any comments or anything if you want. It's not so strict a presentation. If you have any questions or anything, please feel free to jump in.
Do you have the answer to that Hashi question? I seriously have no idea.
Let's see. You know what? Let's start going through them anyway, and then as we go through, some of them are. One of the Japanese ones I got help with from a Japanese teacher, so I will admit to not being super fluent in Japanese, but I do like dajare and puns and things. So that's what I tried to do with their question. So, for example, the first question, here's what I would do with students. I give them some time to answer the questions, or I can set it up where right now I set it up as an open free navigation throughout these questions. So you can jump around, you can go back, you can re-answer questions, but I can also set it up where it's a teacher decided navigation. So I can move the class together question by question. So we're all on the same question at the same time. This one is kind of just a free navigation. So there are 4, if you can see on my screen here, there are 4 people logged into this quiz, and 3 of those people have answered this question. So if you have a class of